Retirement is not always the dream you imagined. In fact, there's usually 4 things that blindside people as they enter retirement, and here's what you can do to avoid them. Okay, the first one that's so unfortunately common is that your savings isn't what you thought it would be, right? You thought you'd be able to save, you're taught that if you just save so many hundreds or thousands of dollars a month, you'll have millions in retirement, right? But the reality is it's just not that way, because even when you have the stock market going up, especially the last 16 years, we've seen a really good uptrend in the market. The problem is that it also goes back down. And so when you get to that point, especially when you consider inflation being higher than what most people tell you it is, when you start factoring in taxes and everything else, and the fact that just if you want to live from day to day, it's more expensive. So the problem is this, like for example, you're told that if you save up $1 million, people used to tell you the 4% rule, you can live on $40,000 a year, but that's not true. If you retire in your 60s, it's actually a 3% rule. Now, if you retire and wait till your 70s, like many people some money managers will tell you nowadays to do, if you wait till your 70s, yeah, it could be 4%, but in your 60s, it's 3%. That means if you have $1 million actually saved up, which so few people have done, you can live on $30,000 a year. And so you're gonna feel tempted, or even you're trying to go into this retirement saying, that's not cool because that doesn't feel like enough. So just be aware that that's one of the biggest problems as you enter retirement, is that your money, you just have to live on less than the interest to ensure you don't run out of money in the future. And as a result, probably number 2 is you still feel financially anxious, maybe even more than before. Now, you might have always been worried about what's going to happen in the markets and this or that, but now that you actually hit retirement, now you're starting to wonder, what happens if all of a sudden Trump goes crazy? Will my retirement account drop 5% in one day? Will that mean that I'm going back to work? Do I have to work as a Walmart greeter, or do I have to do something else, or work at Subway as a sandwich artist, because I'm really good at that? What does it have to do? And so your anxiousness doesn't actually decrease in retirement, it increases, because if you're not generating more income, you now know it's all on your retirement accounts to do it all for you. And this is why you worry about Social Security, right? This is why I don't believe Social Security will go away. But what if they do lower the benefits? What if they do cut them in by 25%? Will that affect your lifestyle, especially when inflation is growing by more than what the government claims? So Social Security doesn't even keep up with inflation. How is the rest of your money going to do the same thing? And that's just all that uncertainty, all that fear. And of course, financial advisors don't know what's going to happen. They're not helpful at all. So you're just at a place where you just have to live either in ignorance or you freak out. Here's a third thing that surprises most retirees. In those first few years of retirement, did you know that retirees spend more in the first few years of retirement than they do later in retirement? And the reason is this, is you're adjusting, right? You get that first taste of freedom. You're feeling amazing, right? This is like the first time I became a business owner. I remember feeling the freedom. I didn't have to go to that W-2 job anymore. I'm thinking, I've got the day to decide what to do on my own. And then it was the next week, I'm like, crap, I got to pay all my bills still, right? It's all on me. I can't just wait, rely on a stable job or income to do that. And that's the very same thing for retirees, that now all of a sudden, you retire, expenses are going up. You have health and medical costs that are going up, of course, and you have to figure out how to adjust to that and figure out about Medicare and Medicaid and all these other things you're supposed to be dealing with, right? And then you, of course, you got other ththings. You might want to travel and do some of the things you've been delaying for decades, you finally get to do. And so it's very, very common that most retirees spend the bulk of their savings actually in those first few years. Now, I'm not saying you spend the majority of it, but you spend a lot more than you do later on as you start to get into a rhythm. So just be aware, it's very common that you're going to spend more than you expect in those first few years. And then the fourth thing is that you kind of miss having a purpose. You miss having something to work for. This is why so many times we've actually talked to people about not retirement, but about becoming work optional, right? Is where you work because you want to, not because you have to. And what happens is so many retirees get to this point, they kind of lose that purpose or that drive or those goals. And yeah, it might feel great to have that freedom in the beginning, but then you say, well, now what? What's going to challenge me? What might want to challenge my mind? Or what do I want to do here? What's my next, as we might call it, right? What's my next purpose or thing I can do? Do I want to do more with philanthropy? Do I want to do more in serving? Do I want to actually not just travel, but maybe have different experiences, right? Maybe I want to be able to be a mentor to my children and my grandchildren. Whatever it might be, you got to find that next purpose. And that's one thing, is that if you leave your job and try to full on retire, which almost sounds like, get rid of that cow, it's lame. It's like, it feels like you've lost that purpose. And so a lot of people will slip into a depression, or at least feel like they just lose the motivation. They feel like now time just flies by because they don't have much to do with that day. And that's one thing that I don't really like. I think you should have a purpose and a next. I know because I've actually retired, quote unquote, retired twice before I was 40, and I felt it every time. Every time I tried to do it, I had to have some purpose. This is why I came back to work. But the difference is you can you work on your own terms? And that's what really comes to the solution right here is what is that ability? How can we become work optional? How can we not worry about retirement at all? I'll tell you, I had a client named Dan. He was 60 years old, retired, actually had $1 million in his retirement account. But when he went to his financial advisor, he says, well, you can now live on $30,000 a year. He said, well, come on, I'm too young for Social Security, for one. I can't even get that. But two, $30,000 a year does not work in the state of California. I need something else. Now, Dan had a choice. He could spend more money than he was recommended doing, but then he would risk losing it all. By the way, Dan also had a pension. Many of us don't have pensions to back us up. So he had a pension to help out a little bit, but it still was a very limited budget that he was living on in California. And so eventually he found our Money Ripples podcast, and he said, okay, I'm liking what this sounds like. And so what we did is we got his money away from Wall Street and the typical mutual fund crappy stock market where you live on very little, less than interest, and we got him to cash flowing investments. Things like real estate. He bought a couple of duplexes that he didn't have to manage. Somebody else managed it for him because he wanted to, again, have that time freedom. He also had money in lending money. He also did some things with oil and gas. He even had some money working in apartment buildings where he had shared ownership in that. But again, he wasn't managing any of this stuff. It was all hands-off investments. And guess what? Instead of living on $30,000 a year, that million was now producing over $130,000 a year. And you know what's so cool about that is that he never actually got to enjoy a long retirement. I just found out a few months ago he passed away. He actually had a heart attack. He was sitting at his desk working on a Monday night, just working on something, and he basically just died of a heart attack right then and there. And what I'm so grateful for is he had those 4 years of freedom. 4 years to choose to live life on his own terms. The guy actually volunteered for the fire service and did different projects that way. He started to work on things he really cared about. He had a next passion project. He started teaching his kids. He started teaching them about the investing type of strategies we talk about too. Started teaching them different stuff. He started to really teach other people. He became a teacher and a leader. And that is one of the coolest things that happens when you have enough passive income coming in that you don't have to worry about running out of money. And that's what happened with Dan, and that's what could happen with you too. So you can do the same thing. You don't have to be shocked in retirement or all of a sudden worry about something's going to happen to you or you're not going to have enough lasting for longer. You can become work optional by having enough passive income to last the rest of your life and even create a legacy for your family as well. Just go to moneyripples.com/consulting to learn how you can create a work optional blueprint to get you there. Go do that today.